Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the December 28th, 2017 Tag Team edition of The Breast There Is, The Breast There Was, and The Breast There Ever Will Be Wrestling Podcast. As always, I am your host, Mikey B, WWE. And this is a tag team edition because I'm covering 2 weeks worth of WWE programming and news and events as opposed to the normal 1 week's edition. So, dating back now to the 17th of December, which was the Clash of Champions pay-per-view. Going into the night, I had given my predictions for 7 matches, which were listed on the WWE.com website, showing for the pay-per-view. It wound up being that one of these matches, which was the Mojo Rawley versus Zack Ryder matchup, was placed on the pre-show instead of the main card. I always make sure to check the website, the official WWE website, before I give any predictions, because sometimes this does happen where matches get moved onto the main card or onto the pre-show card, what have you. But ultimately, they listed this one as a main carder. And after careful deliberation, I decided that I will not count that towards my prediction count, even though there's been a couple pay-per-views earlier in the year, which, like I just mentioned, there were matches that were added spontaneously to the pay-per-view. So, of course, naturally, anyone giving predictions wouldn't have had a chance to add their prediction to that match. So, ultimately, I decided I'm just going to stick with the matches that actually were featured on the card. And those other matches, which I never got a chance to tally, well, that's how that goes. Then other people also wouldn't have been able to give a proper prediction either. So, now having said that, since instead of 7 matches, there were 6 matches at the Clash of Champions pay-per-view, I wound up getting 4 of the 6 correct, and the only 2 which I got wrong, which was the first being the United States Championship match. I think most people probably weren't expecting Dolph Ziggler to come away with the belt, even though, of course, he's such a seasoned veteran, and he's won lots of belts over his career. But in my defense, he's definitely been resigned to being a veteran sort of jobber character wrestler on the WWE programming. He just has been putting over a lot of younger talent and other people that are getting a proper push. So that was a bit of a surprise, but it was a crowd-pleasing response, certainly, when Dolph got his title. So that one I guessed incorrectly. And the other one, which I thought would have changed hands, was the women's Smackdown Women's Championship. I thought Natalya would have won the title back from Charlotte Flair, just to kind of keep their program going, possibly with interference from the Riot Squad, since it was a lumberjack-style match. But ultimately, Charlotte wound up retaining. So, regardless, getting 4 out of 6 kept me above 50% on the night, which is good. That's another consecutive pay-per-view for me where I've maintained an above 50% prediction rate. So, okay, so after covering Clash of Champions, now starting up with Monday Night Raw on the 18th of December. They're in these holiday weeks. I sort of mentioned last week and in previous weeks that, 2 weeks ago when I did my last podcast, that they're around this time prior to January, it's really a bit of a slow time. And then once January gets going and the Royal Rumble starts to pick up all the storyline developments surrounding that, that's really when the WWE gets going, because that sort of starts the road to WrestleMania, as they like to refer to it. So there aren't a great deal of storylines, but the few that occurred in these past 2 weeks were pretty noteworthy. So I'll make sure to cover these. The first being on that December 18th edition of Monday Night Raw, there was to be a 2-on-1 handicap match between members of the Miztourage, Bo Dallas and Curtis Axel, taking on Finn Balor. And during the course of this match, we were introduced to a new performer on the main roster, at least, someone coming up from NXT who evidently has quite a history with Finn Balor. I'm referring to Hideo Itami, who looked quite impressive as he was helping Finn out. It was then decided on spur of the moment that instead of a two-on-one match, which was resulting in a disqualification anyways, it was restarted with Hideo Itami being the teammate of Finn Balor as they took on Dallas and Curtis Axel, and Finn Balor and Hideo Itami were victorious in Hideo's first in-ring action on the main program of WWE. In other action, there was a number one contender match for the Cruiserweight WWE Cruiserweight Championship between Drew Gulak and Cedric Alexander, which Cedric Alexander was able to come away with the victory there, so setting up a title opportunity against Enzo Amore. And besides this, if you've haven't tuned in at all to wrestling during the holidays here, the big announcement, of course, came right at the end of this edition of Monday Night Raw, which WWE has certainly promoted ad nauseum, which was during the end of the broadcast, all the women, at least on Monday Night Raw, were featured in the ring, and then Stephanie McMahon decided to come down and sort of interrupt them with the announcement, the very exciting announcement that for the first time in WWE history, that in addition to a men's Royal Rumble match on January the 28th, we will all be treated to the first ever women's Royal Rumble match. So, that's a great step. They've, as they've mentioned on their telecast, they've done a lot of firsts with this women's revolution, as they call it, with the women's division in the WWE. They had their first Hell in a Cell in the last couple years, Hell in a Cell match for the women. They've had Money in the Bank matches. So, you know what? It's great. It's wonderful that there's enough great talent now in the female division too that will permit such a match with featuring so many competitors. So that was certainly the big news at the end of that broadcast, which was repeated numerous times over the following 2 weeks. So I'm sure unless you've been living under a rock or have avoided WWE broadcasting and programming for the last few weeks, you've definitely heard about that. So, but anyways, it's a great announcement nevertheless. So moving over to Smackdown the following evening on December the 19th, the only major noteworthy event which occurred was after the stunning victory by Dolph Ziggler the 2 nights before at Clash of Champions, capturing the United States Championship belt. Dolph just came into the ring, and after a little bit of a verbal tirade he went on, he decided to just leave the belt in the ring, sort of relinquish his title, without really much of a formal announcement besides just dropping it in the belt in the middle center of the ring and walking away from it. So that left that all up in the air. And, that's certainly typical of WWE to do this, to change title one night and then a couple nights later that person already loses possession of it. So, yeah, it's too bad. It would have been nice to see what they would have done with Dolph Ziggler having the title, but certainly his future right now remains in doubt. So that was really the only exciting moment on that SmackDown edition. Moving over to the first ever Christmas edition of Monday Night Raw. The big news, certainly, that was mentioned on this broadcast after a bit of a physical mix-up the week before, it was announced that Dean Ambrose would be missing up to 9 months of action from the ring. So, and this news should be taken with a grain of salt. WWE always loves to take great caution with erring on the side of caution when they announce injury lengths. It's to their benefit always to say, it's going to be such a long time, and then as a surprise to everybody, this person comes back in half the time or a third of the time, making them seem so much stronger and more invincible and everything. But 9 months, it's certainly a while that could put Dean Ambrose's WrestleMania status in jeopardy. So that was certainly surprising, and it really, I think, thwarted the WWE's attempt keep the Shield's kind of quasi-reunion intact. That's certainly all on hold right now while Ambrose will be sidelined. So we're going to wait and see how serious this becomes and how this develops. But for now, he's on the shelf for quite some time. And so, speaking of Dean Ambrose, his former Shield brother and former ex-tag team champion, Seth Rollins, he's still carrying on with how him and Dean Ambrose, they were doing a lot of battles with Cesaro and Sheamus for these last few months, going back and forth in their feud. So instead of Dean Ambrose, of course, being unable to compete, they had Jason Jordan step in, and they decided that there would be a title match for the Raw Tag Team Championships that night, with Seth Rollins and Jason Jordan taking on the formidable duo of Cesaro and Sheamus in the main event of the evening. And wouldn't you know it, Jason Jordan and Seth Rollins happened to be victorious, winning the belts here. I mentioned this on a podcast in the last few months when they brought together Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins after a lot of mixed feelings and reluctance from Dean Ambrose because he wasn't sure if he could trust Seth Rollins, etc. I had a feeling that they were really going to work this storyline with them being the champs for a while and eventually dropping the belts and possibly culminating in a feud, or at least a match, a high-profile match at like WrestleMania, for instance, between Ambrose and Seth Rollins. Obviously, this Ambrose sidelining injury puts a real wrinkle into, I think, any plans they were going to do, any programs they were going to do with him and Seth Rollins and possibly Roman Reigns, if they were going to do the Shield being together or sort of having some issues, some conflict within. So I have a feeling if Dean Ambrose was healthy, this would have been just them winning the titles right back themselves instead of Jason Jordan. This was definitely, and I'll say it right now, this was they decided this sort of on the fly. When Ambrose is injured, they thought, okay, well, let's get the belt back to Rollins, and let's give him someone else to be a tag team partner with. So Jason Jordan fits the bill. So now moving on to Smackdown the following evening, which was December 26th, on Boxing Day. There was a number one contenders match for the Usos Smackdown Tag Team Championships. There was a triple threat match between Chad Gable and Shelton Benjamin against Rusev Day, Rusev and Aiden English, and also against the New Day tag team. And Chad Gable and Shelton Benjamin were successful. For the second week in a row, they were able to defeat the Usos on SmackDown pretty clean. So, the fact that they now earned an official number one contendership spot just for themselves, that's certainly some news. It's, it made you wonder how long they were going to wait to do something with Shelton Benjamin since his big return a few months ago. So, anyway, Shelton Benjamin and Chad Gable are the new number one contenders for the Usos SmackDown Tag Team Championships. In other news, due to Dolph Ziggler's relinquishing of the United States Championship, General Manager Daniel Bryan decided to come out and decide upon having a tournament style to see who would be crowned as the next United States champion. So they already began with the quarterfinal matchups for this on this broadcast. The first of which was between Bobby Roode and Baron Corbin. And even though these two men were in the triple threat match against Dolph Ziggler on Clash of Champions on the Sunday night of the 17th, and despite the fact that Shane McMahon backstage called out Daniel Bryan saying that, doesn't make sense, Baron Corbin should be able to have his rematch clause since he lost the belt to Dolph Ziggler in that triple threat. It seems unfair that he now has to go through the tournament style and has to qualify just like everybody else. So that was just, I think, merely showing that there's still some dissension between Shane McMahon and Daniel Bryan on the SmackDown governing side of things. So, but regardless, the tournament has persisted. And in that first opening match, Bobby Roode was successful, defeating Baron Corbin, moving him in now to a semifinal matchup for that title. And then in the other match they had for the United States title in the tournament was Jinder Mahal taking on Ty Dillinger. Jinder Mahal wound up being successful in this match, so he's also moved on to the semifinals. I think this makes sense. If they're not going to keep Jinder Mahal in the main title picture, since he's been in that title picture for the last 7-8 months, it's good to keep him relevant by having him compete for another important singles championship. So, yeah, I like this. I think that was a good move. And that more or less covers all the important stuff going on in WWE right now. Again, a bit of a slow time, but January promises to be action-packed, lots going on. Not only with the build-up to the first Royal Rumble featuring 2 Royal Rumble matchups, which will be great. Of course, they've been announcing the 25th anniversary of Raw, also to be celebrated the week before Royal Rumble, I believe. So there's going to be a lot happening, and it's really going to kick things going into full gear here, heading into WrestleMania season, which is, let's face it, as far as I'm concerned, this is the best time of year to be a wrestling fan, when Royal Rumble's right on the cusp, and then we got WrestleMania around the corner too. So certainly a very exciting time. So that covers everything. I want to wish everybody a happy holidays and a happy new year. If you liked what you heard today, please don't forget to like and subscribe below. Thanks very much for listening, and have a safe and healthy new year. See you next time.